Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Nedarim, Daf Tes and Daf Yomi. This afternoon I went over to my bookcase to pull off a Gemara, and out of pure comfort I pulled off a Ksubis and started walking away, and it wasn't the same exact width of book. So then I realized that I took the wrong one, which is a good thing because this page is not found in there. So we're starting at a brand new Mishnah. We're learning all the way up to the next Mishnah, which is a blot and a half later on Yud Aleph on Shabbos. We'll be learning 45 minutes before Mincha instead of an hour, just because of scheduling this week. We'll have enough time to finish the blot, so no problem there at all. As you can see, Daf Yud Aleph is pretty short, so we'll be doing just fine. Let's get started. Mishnah, top of Testament Aleph. If a person says Kinidre Rishayim, he doesn't say much more than that. All he says is Kinidre Rishayim. I'm going to do this neder like a Rasha. This is what we would refer to as a yad. It's an indirect language. So if a regular person says that, then nadar ben nazir uve korban uve shvua, then it's binding. It basically brings about an obligation for nazirus if he was talking about nazirus, or a korban or a shvua, respectively, whichever one he was dealing with. The Gemara then says, Kinidrek Sherim. What if a person says Kinidrek Sherim, lo amar klum? Why lo amar klum? Because really, and we'll debate this in the Gemara today, is it or is it not appropriate to make a neder in the first place? Take a look at the Ran. The Ran is about 15 lines down. Dibur hamaskal Kinidrek Sherim. I believe there are different stretches of Ran here. I don't know if everybody has the full Ran. I have no idea, because in the introduction to the art scroll, it said that not the whole Ran was brought in the art scroll. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what versions we all have. But this one is Dibur Hamaschil Kinidrek Sherim, and says the Ran, Afal Gabdo Amar Hareini Alai or Heimenu or V'haya Nazir or Behema o Kikar Lefana Lo Amar Klum. Why is it that even if he says a specific language that I want to be like these people, like these tzaddikim, the ksherim who are making this, it's nothing. Sharei Ein HaKsherim Nodrim She'ein Rishayin Lasos Kein. You're not allowed to make a neder. If you do, you're obligated in it, but it's not considered ideal to make a neder in the first place. And we'll get back to this machlokas later in the Gemara. So that's our Mishnah. If we say that we want to be like Rishayim and it's a yad, it's a distant language from the actual language, then that's binding. And if we say Kinidre Ksherim, then that's not binding. However, in regards to the Ksherim, if we say Kinidvosam, if we say a language of Nedava, a Nedava is okay, that's fine, and it's binding. Then Nadar ben Nazir uve korban, then that is binding, and you would have to then bring about your Neder or your Nazirus or your korban, whatever it is. That's the Mishnah. A little cryptic, and we'll kind of have to take it apart. And as I've said a number of times already in this Masechta, one of the challenges of the subtleties in language is that it's not our language, so we don't have the feelings that come with the words. You know, if we say I commit or I promise, they have different feelings to them. So we understand that in English. We don't understand it in the Gemara. So sometimes we'll see, as we will today, some small, gentle changes in language, but it's meaningful halachically. It's just hard for us to appreciate. And the Gemara opens, the Dilma Hachi Kamar. Maybe what he was saying in regards to the first line of the Mishnah, instead of saying Kinidre Rishayim that he wants to be like them, maybe what he meant is Hachi Kamar, Kinidre Rishayim lo nadarna. All he said was Kinidre Rishayim. So maybe he's saying, I don't want to be like them. All he said was, how do you know which way he meant it? Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel be'omer Kinidre Rishayim Hareini Alai or V'heimenu. He says, no, I want to do what they're doing. And that's all. That already is, why is that a yad anymore? It's strange already, because you're saying it's Kinidre Rishayim, I want to do what they said. Either the verse ended either Kinidre Rishayim Hareini, or Kinidre Rishayim Alai, or Kinidre Rishayim V'heimenu. And we're going to analyze these three words again, same as before. These words don't sound very different to us in regards to their translations, but they were meaningful halachically. When a person says Hareini, we're on the 5th, 6th line of Testament Aleph, that's a reference to Benazirus. When a person says Alai, that's a reference to Bekorban. So let's just put it all together. Kinidre Rishayim Hareini is Nazirus. Kinidre Rishayim Alai is Bekorban. Kinidre Rishayim Heimenu, that's talking about Beshvua. Says the Gemara, how do you know that the word Hareini is talking about Nazirus? Hareini Nazirus, Dermal Hareini B'tainis Kamar, Hareini, I shall be. How do you know what we're talking about? Says the Gemara, Anukimta, Amar Shmuel, Kshahaya Nazir over Lefanav. Oh, okay, fine. I want to be like this guy. Then I understand why the Gemara says that the word Hareini means Nazirus. But remember, this is an Ukimta. So what that means is that the word Hareini doesn't inherently mean Nazirus. It just means Kinidre Rishayim Hareini. Like that rush over there, I want to be like that. Oh, says the Gemara, that's a yad. That's a yad and it's binding. So the language of Hareini is in and of itself not valuable. But when the person is standing in front of you, then it's valuable. And if he says, I want to be like another commitment, we'll see others in a moment, then so be it. But the word hareni is not actually inherently valuable. What? That's what makes it mochiach. Correct, we saw earlier. This is Shmuel.
Maybe the question is not even, it doesn't even start according to him, because it doesn't have to go.
Right. By the way, it's really a machlokas Abaye and Rava, and it happens to be that Rava is like Shmuel. The way the Gemara presents it is as a machlokas Abaye. You're right that there's a party line between Rava and Shmuel from earlier in the Masechta. That's true. But the presentation of the machlokas is Abaye Rava, and it seems to be that what you're saying is true. In other words, when Shmuel gives this answer, we shouldn't be surprised, because this is his tagline. You know, like, oh, hareni what? Obviously, says Shmuel, has to be that there was a person there. And then the Gemara continues as well, skipping the parentheses halfway down. Heimenu b'shvua, we said that if he says, Kinidre Rishayim heimenu, we said that's b'shvua. How do you know? Dilma heimenu de achil nakam, or maybe he was talking about food. Amar Rava de Amar heimenu shelo ochel. It just depends what the context is. It's not that he should eat. In this case, it's shelo ochel, because that's what he said. Same as you said before, that it's yodayim mochichos. Yihachi ma'ila meimra, if a person says, Kinidre Rishayim heimenu lo shelo ochel, then ma'ila meimra, of course you should not be able to eat under those circumstances. Says the Gemara, Ma'u detema halom mapik shvua mipume kamash malan. You might have thought that this isn't enough, that this really isn't a shvua, because the language isn't shvua, it's yad language. Still, says the Gemara, it is kamash malan, that it is enough. In other words, it's considered a yad. Because you're right, it's not considered the clear and obvious simplistic language. I was learning in the base measures yesterday, and somebody said to me, what's with all these ridiculous cases? They're ridiculous in some way. It's true. Every single word needs to be chosen. Really, the answer is that the Gemara always tries to find the outer limit or the beginning threshold. So they're the same line as to where a halacha stands. So here we're trying to figure out a yad, and our Mishnah is another presentation of a case of a yad that is a little bit difficult to understand. So therefore, the yad that we're saying is Kinidre Rishayim heimenu shelo ochel. Is that considered binding or not? Says the Gemara, Kamash Malan, yes, it is. The next word, Hadain, needed to be edited out. It doesn't make any sense here at all, and it's removed. Then the Gemara says, Kinidre ksherim lo amar klum, but kinidvosam, that it would be considered a neder, it would be considered a commitment. In other words, what we see in our Mishnah is that the author of our Mishnah holds that a neder of a kosher is problematic, but a nedava of a kosher is mutter. That's what the Gemara says. And therefore, the Gemara asks, Man Tana Tishani Le Bein Neder Lindava. Who's the author of our Mishnah that seems to say that there's a difference for ksherim between a neder, which is not allowed, and a nedava, which is allowed? Who is the author of that? And the Gemara foreshadows what the rest of the Gemara is going to be about. Lema lo Rabbi Meir v'lo Rabbi Huda. This is going to be our topic until the end of the day today. And the Amud that follows on the Amud Beis, it's going to be all about Rabbi Meir. And the next Amud is going to be about Rabbi Huda to see whether or not they fit in our Mishnah. So our Mishnah has no names, but our Mishnah seems to show a distinction between a neder and a nedava by a kosher, that by a kosher a neder is not allowed and a nedava is. So how do we know that it's not Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda? Because the Gemara says, the Tanya, we have a brisa, and this brisa quotes a couple of psukim. I'm going to read the psukim in full because we really do need them in order to understand the Gemara. The Gemara has two psukim in Koheles. This is Koheles Perek, psukim Gimel Vidal. Ka'asher tidur neder lelokim. When a person brings a neder to Hashem or makes a neder to Hashem, al ta'acher l'shalmo, do not delay in fulfilling it. Ki ein chayfetz baksilim es asher tidor shalem. There's no joy in being a fool. That which you committed, you should fulfill. Next pasuk says, Tov asher lo sidor misha tidor velo seshalem. It's better to not commit than it is to commit and not fulfill. So that's what the Gemara presents. Titania, 4 lines from the bottom. Tov asher lo tidor. So how do we understand these two psukim? Says the Gemara, the Tanakama holds. We'll see that this is Rav Meir. Tov mizeh umizeh she'eno noder kol ikar. It's better that he makes no commitment at all. Because in the psukim, there was one possibility. The first pasuk says, if you make a neder, fulfill it. Maybe the ideal is to make a neder and fulfill it. Or no, do we say like the second pasuk is don't even bother making the neder lest you not fulfill it? We don't know which one. So Rav Meir is planting a flag and he's saying you should not do anything. Don't make nedarim. As you can see, 3 lines from the bottom by the word she'eno noder, there's a little letter at the top of that, the Os Katan Daled, which brings us to the Torah Shulchan Aruch Yerodeh Siman Reish Gimel Sif Aleph, where this halacha is quoted that it's better to not make nedarim lest we not fulfill them. However, there's still a dissenting opinion, and that is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Tov mizeh mizeh, noder umeshalem. It is actually best to thread the needle, to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let a person make a neder, but they should do their best to fulfill it. Like any other commitment that we may make in life or whatever it may be. Maybe this is why the Gemara says, Tov shelo nivra, would have been better had we never been created, because you could see Reb Meir is very concerned that we can't fulfill our own obligations. Now, neither of these shitas, Rav Meir or Rav Yehuda, as they're presented here, fit into our Mishnah. Rav Meir says nothing at all, nothing. You're done. Not a neder, and also seemingly not even an adava. And Rav Yehuda says no, you should make a neder, and that's against our Mishnah as well. So therefore, who is the author of our Mishnah? It doesn't seem to fit with Rav Meir or with Rav Yehuda. And on the very last line, the last 3 words on Testament Aleph, the Gemara gives answer number 1. Afilu tema Rav Meir. We could even squeeze in the shita of Rav Meir that he may fit into our Mishnah. Let's remember what our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah says that by a kosher, by a person who's a regular yid, not a rasha, so he is not allowed to make a neder, but he is allowed to make an adava. And Rav Meir seemed to be categorical about it, that he can't do either. So the Gemara says, Ki ka'amar Rav Meir ben neder. He was only talking about a neder. Ben adava lo ka'amar. If you look at the language of Rav Meir doesn't speak of a neder. He just speaks broadly that you shouldn't do any of this. The tov mizeh mizeh, don't do any of this. And therefore, we initially understood Rav Meir to mean that you're not allowed to make a neder or a nedava. That's an incorrect way to understand Rav Meir. Perhaps all that he meant was that you're not allowed to do a neder, but you are allowed to do a nedava, which is our Mishnah, which is a perfect match. So Rav Meir does match our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Because at the end of our Mishnah, what does it say? V'aktani kinidvosam nadar benazir uvekorban. So our Mishnah does talk about a nedava, which means that it's therefore the case that Rav Meir, when he said mizeh, was also forbidding even a nedava. So it doesn't work out well. The Gemara responds, you're right. That case is not kinidvosam neder ben nazir uvekorban. Change the language. It's nadav ben nazir uvekorban. If we change the language, then Rav Meir fits in our Mishnah. And then the Gemara asks a broad question, Maishna noder delo, within the shita of our Mishnah itself, and within this new understanding of Rav Meir, who can possibly be the author of our Mishnah. Why is it that we see a distinction between a neder that we don't allow? Because dilma asi ba lidek takala. We're afraid that if a person makes a neder, this is Rav Meir's primary fundamental concern, that if a person makes a neder, he may slip up and not fulfill that neder. That we understand. Nedava nami lo. Okay, they're different halachically, but lemaisa, when you make a neder, you're bringing a chiyuv upon yourself. And when you're making an adava, you're bringing a chiyuv upon yourself. So why do we make this distinction between a neder and an adava in the first place? Fundamental question in our Mishnah. Nedava namilo dilma asi balidei takala. So says the Gemara, the reason why we make a distinction between a neder and an adava in our Mishnah is kehilal hazaken. Titania, the Brisa writes, Amru al hilal hazaken shalomal adam be'olaso kol yamav. Never was there a case of me'ila in his days. Why? Because mevia kshehi chulin la'azara. When the animal was still chulin, they brought the animal as chulin. They weren't makdish the animal before they left and said, Betsy, I'm making you into kodshim, and we're walking. No, this animal walked to the Beis HaMikdash as chulin. And then when it got to the Azara, then umakdisha v'somech alav v'shochta. Then the animal was raised in its kedusha to be hektish, and then we did smicha, which is unrelated to our conversation, and the animal was shechted. So it says the Gemara, that's exactly right. When it comes to an adava by korbanos, in the times of Hillel, an adava was perfectly mutter, because we saw that based on the way that they had set up the standards of the Beis HaMikdash, their protocols, it was simple. Nobody was makdish an animal outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so there was no concern about the nadava not being fulfilled. The Nedava only became a real Nedava when they got to the Beis HaMikdash, so there's no concern. So therefore, our Mishnah is strict about a Neder, but we're lenient in regards to a Nedava. Says the Gemara, an obvious question, 8-9 lines down, Hanicha Nedava de Korbanos. That, you answered good because of Hillel, that he had protocols to make sure that there were no Nedavas that weren't fulfilled because they were not Mukdash until they got to the Beis HaMikdash. But what about Nedava de Nazirus? Ma'ikol Meimar. But there are other kinds of nedava. A person can take a nedava, a volunteer status of nazirus. It's a nedava instead of a neder, and they're different, granted. So then the Gemara says, let's try and answer this. Savarla k'shem and hatzadik. We know that Shimon HaTzadik was one of the Kohanim Gedolim. And the Gemara tells a beautiful story that we've seen before. Where did we see this? No. It says we saw it in Nazir Daf Dalet. The Tanya. That's not true. Okay, let's continue. I don't know. It's like a mistake. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Amar Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik said, Mi Yomai, in all of my days, Lo achalti asham nazir tameh ela echad. There's only one time that I ever ate an animal of a person who was a nazir who was tameh. Meaning, it was very rare for a person to have a nedava of nazirus to be tameh. What was the case? Pamachas ba adam echad nazir min adarim. There was a person who came from the Negev. He came from the south of Eretz Yisrael. He was a nazir. V'ra'isiv, and I saw him. Shehu yefei einaim. He had beautiful eyes. V'tov roi. He was good looking. Ukvutzosav siduros lo taltalim, and his hair had beautiful curls. Remember, the language is very reminiscent of anim zemiros. When I was in yeshiva, no ktanim could say anim zemiros. No ktanim had any kibudim at all. Zero. No psicha. No anim zemiros. Anim zemiros is like kodesh, 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 kodashim, and we give it to a child to do, and then we all talk in the back. Right. I'm just saying it's the whole thing became a bizayon because not only does the child not understand it, but we're talking the whole time. But it's the Gra is makbid to not always say or to not say at all, to not say anim zemiros because we're just, and he's the Gra, and we're not the Gra. We're like messing around with the wiring upstairs. It's not a good thing to do. Anyways, just a reference to the language here. This guy was a gorgeous human being. Perfect. So Amarti lo, Shimon HaTzadik said to this person, he said to this guy, Bini, your hair's gorgeous. Why would you cut your hair? You look like a hair model. Leave it be. Amar Li, this guy was really a big tzaddik. Let's see how big of a tzaddik he was. Halfway down on Testament base. I was a shepherd for my father in the city in which I lived. And I went to go fill up the reservoirs, to fill up the jugs with water to feed the animals. And I looked at my reflection in the water. When I saw that, my Yetzer Hara overcame me. And it tried to distract me from this world by making me do averos. Amarti lo, I said to the Yetzer Hara, so the good-looking guy says to the Yetzer Hara, Rasha, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get me to make a mistake. I'm going to be worms. I might be good looking today, but it's not going to last forever. By the time you're in the ground, it doesn't take long to decay. So the Gemara says over here, this guy, good hashkafa. This guy's got good hashkafas. You can be as good looking as you want, but this is the right way to look at things. And he makes a promise. Ha'avoda, the lashon of shvuah. I'm going to shave off my head or shave off my hair for heaven. Miyad, says Shimon HaTzadik, Amati v'noshakti val rosho. I went over to him and I gave him a kiss on the head. Amarti lebani kamocha yerbu nozrei naziros beYisrael. You did it right. This is the right way to become a nazir. Now, and let's just finish off the story. Alecha hakasuv omer asher ishki yafli lindor neder nazir lahazir laHashem. This is the right way to become a nazir. You did this beautifully. What is the Gemara responding to? Remember our question from before. We had said that we understood in regards to korbanos as to why a nedava of korbanos didn't have concerns because of the protocols of Hillel HaZakeh. Why is it that by Nazirus it wasn't a problem? Because it was rare for people to do it, that anyone would ever do that. So therefore, the Gemara says that he did it perfectly, and we weren't concerned that he was going to break the rules. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, Maskif lo Rav Mani, Maishna Asham Nazir Tameh de lo Achal to Asi al Chet. Why is it that when it comes to an Asham, the korban of a Nazir who is Tameh, we don't eat it to Asi al Chet? Because we assume that he did some kind of Chet. The Nazir is possibly a Chet in and of itself, even though you're obligated because we know we have to bring korbanos. It's called an asham. Kol ashamos nami lo lechal. Maybe all ashamos should be that way. De al chet asu. All korbanos asham are brought under circumstances of possible chet. Why are we allowed to eat any of it? Why is it different? Why can't we not eat the meat of an asham nazir, but we can of a regular asham chatos? Says the Gemara, Amar le Rabbi Yonah, Hainu Taima. The reason why is kshehein toin nozrin. When a person they feel overly engaged in the physical world, they scream out in distress and they say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm hereby making a commitment, and then the person finishes the sentences by saying that they want to be a nazir. And if throughout their first 30 days or their whole 30 days they become tameh again, let's say on day 15 they become tamei, so they have to start their count again, and they become a nazir now for 30 more days, which is a total of 45, and v'chule v'chule. If before the 30th day hits, they become a nazir yet again, then it continues. And if that happens, then they feel charata. That charata undoes their commitment. And then if they bring a korban on day 45, they already had charata, which undoes their nazirus, which means that the korban that they brought was bringing chulin la'azara, because it's not really a chiyuv anymore. The only time there's a chiyuv to bring this korban is when you complete your 30 days. But if on day 29 you had charata, or in our case on day 44 you had charata, I can't do this anymore, but you still brought the korban the next day, you're maybe chulin la'azara. Says the Gemara, Hachi. It's a very good argument. I totally understand that. But then afilu nazir tahor nami. Okay, charata is charata is charata. Maybe a nazir has charata without ever having become tamei. Regular guy, 30-day commitment. If it says he wants to become a nazir on day 29, he has charata because he saw a gorgeous bottle of wine that was being served at the table. He couldn't drink it, so he had charata. Maybe his korban is also going to be chulin that's brought in the azara. That's a great question. The Gemara says nazir tahor lo. That's not correct. De amude amid nafshe de yachol lindor. That's not the case. But when he shows up for a korban, we check in on him. When did you start your Naziros? And he'll say 30 days ago. You assess the guy. You do a little check-in, a little interview. When he gets to the Beis HaMikdash, was it easy for you? Did you drink? Did you ever have charata? They'll talk to him. They can assess. You can tell. You can tell when someone is just overwhelmed and therefore seemingly bringing the korban when they should not, versus a case like this. All of this that we have learned so far is really all part one to understand our Mishnah. We had said that our Mishnah, which makes a distinction between a neder and a nedava, that a neder is not allowed and a nedava is, seem to not fit with either Reb Meir or Reb Yehuda. And the Gemara says that it does fit with Reb Meir because Reb Meir's language in our Mishnah was, Reb Meir's language at the bottom of Tesamud Aleph was only about neder, and maybe nedava would be mutter. That was answer number one. V'ibai Sema, there's another possible way to understand our Mishnah, and this brings us to the top of Yud Amud Aleph. We'll be going to the Mishnah toward the bottom. And the Gemara says, Afilu Tema Reb Yehuda. What did we say about Rabbi Yehuda? So if you look back on the bottom of Testament Aleph, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that Tov mizel mizen noder mishalim, that the best thing that you can do is to make a neder, but to fulfill the neder, like any other chiyuv that we have. So says the Gemara, how could it be that afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda, back to Yud Amud Aleph top line, ki amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Adava ben neder lo ka'amar, that maybe when Rabbi Yehuda says that yes, you should make your commitments and you should fulfill them, maybe he wasn't talking about Nedarim at all. Maybe he was only talking about a nedava, and therefore the distinctions of our Mishnah that a neder is not allowed and a nedava is works perfectly for Rabbi Yehuda as well. No harm, no foul. Works out great. Says the Gemara, how can you say that? Vaktani, if you look at what Rabbi Yehuda said himself at the Bryce at the bottom of Testament Aleph, it says Tov mizeh umizeh noder umekaye. How can you say we're teaching Rabbi Yehuda to only be within the dava when his own words say no there? Like that's, you got to have some academic integrity. Says the Gemara, I'll show you academic integrity. I'm going to change the sentence. No problem. Tani, no devo mekai. You're right. We should change the brisa. And therefore, we also have a valid approach as to how Rabbi Yehuda could be the author of our Mishnah. Here too, within Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara asks the same question. According to this version of our understanding of the Gemara, the Rabbi Yehuda could be the author of our Mishnah. Maishna noder delo. What was our initial concern about neder in our Mishnah? Dilma asi bali de takala. The davanami dilma asi de takala. So how we asked all of this within Rabbi Meir. Now we're asking the same thing with Rabbi Yehuda. So what would Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda lataime da amar adam maybe kivsaso laazara umakdisha v'samech alev shochta. Very similar answer, just in a different name. On the previous page, we had attributed this to Hillel HaZaken. Rabbi Yehuda, he was a Tana himself, and he had the same protocol. You're coming to the Beis HaMikdash, everybody bring it chulin. You'll be makdash when you get here. The risk is much less. There's no concerns of me'ilah. There's no concerns of anything else. Just leave it be. It's much better that way. Says the Gemara. Same question on this Rabbi Yehuda that we asked on Hillel on the previous page. Tenach nedava de korbanos. I agree with you. You've explained because of your protocols. We understand that no one comes to the Beis HaMikdash with something that's mukdash. They show up with chulin and we're makdash in the Beis HaMikdash. But nedava de nazirus Michael and Meimar. What if a person takes upon nazirus betor nedava? So then why is it that you would say that should be allowed? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda l'taime the Tanya. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Chasidim Rishonim. This is beautiful. Chasidim Rishonim hayu misavin lahavi korban chatas. They're Chasidim Rishonim. They're big tzaddikim. They don't do averas that warrant bringing a korban chatas. But it's one of the Taryag mitzvahs to bring a korban chatas. So how do you fulfill the Tariq mitzvahs when they don't all apply to you? There's no way that Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring about them doing an avera to bring a korban. It's amazing how firm they are. Like
it's a shogeg, so something has to go wrong.
Correct. So maybe correct.
So something has to go wrong.
They had to make a mistake, but Kadosh Baruch Hu would never let it happen by these people. Meanwhile, we're good at the shogegs and the mazes. We don't even. We're fine. Yeah, they're not talking about us. Like we would not be bringing a chatos, but only because we did the Aver B'Mezid. It's a different gestalt. But that's what the Gemara is saying over here. So Maha you osin. What would these Chasidim Rishonim do? They couldn't bring a Korban Chatas because they didn't do any Isurim. So if you don't do an Isur, you can't bring a Shogeg. So and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't bring it upon them. So what did they do? Says the Gemara, Omdin umisnad v'nazirus lamakom kadesh yischayev Korban Chatas lamakom. Oh, says the Gemara, they became Nazirim. Nazirim is the way that you can bring a korban chatas. It's an asham chatas that's brought at the end of the process. It's a chatas that's brought by a nazir, and that's the way they can chaparai. It's incredible. But that also, it says that they're chayav a korban. So are you allowed to be a nazir to bring about a chayav korban? So that's what the Gemara says was the circuitous route for them to get to where they wanted to be. Reb Shimon argues, third of the way down. Reb Shimon Omer, lo nadr ben nazir, ela harotze lahavi ola. They didn't make any nedarim by a nazir, but a person who wants to bring an ola, misnadevu, maybe they can make a nedava. Shlamim, if they want to bring a shlamim, misnadevu, maybe. Toda ve'arba amine lachma, misnadevu, maybe. The toda and the bread, the show breads, you can bring them. Aval ben nazirus. Lo hisnadvu. That's not correct what the Tanakama said, what Rabbi Yehuda said. They did not make themselves into nazirim. Why? Because to become a nazir is to be a chote yourself, and you cannot do that lechatchila. You're not allowed to do that. Fascinating. So there's this machlokas as to whether or not making yourself into a nazir is itself a chet. So that begs just a lot of practical questions. Like if a person says, how can you make a shvua on an isser? So I need Rishonim here to understand this machlokas. It's deeper than what we're seeing on the page, but there is a machlokas as to whether or not it's mutter to make yourself a nazir, to therefore allow yourself to then bring to be mechayiv yourself to bring a chatas at the end. That's a machlokas tanaim. But that's a bittul asay. You're never going to bring a chatas on that. A bittul asay never has a korban associated with it. So you have to find an isur deoraisa. That's a shogeg. That it's not simple. It's not simple. Maybe it's simple for us. It's not simple for tzaddikim, for the Chasidim Rishonim, as they're referred to. It's just amazing. It wasn't even a part of their world that there were averas, like nothing. I just get just like a simple sample from our life. Like I have the Amazon app on my phone, but like my daughters shop on my phone too. So then I see girls. Is that mutter? Is that usher? Is it on the fence? Like it wasn't. These conversations were not even shaykh by then. They're not zero histaklos. Everything they did was mutter. It's an unbelievable mitzvah, and it's a reachable mitzvah for us too. We live in a very complex world as it relates to that. But good. That's a good muster for today. It says the Gemara that this shita about Nazirus is not a standalone shita. Amar Abaye, halfway down, almost at the Mishnah. Shimon HaTzadik, Reb Shimon, Reb Elazar HaKafar, Kulan shita achas in the Nazir chote have. All of these people seem to agree that a Nazir is a chote. Shimon HaTzadik, Reb Shimon, those are the shitas we saw on this page already. Hada Amra. Reb Elazar HaKafar Beribi, what about him? The Tanya. Reb Elazar HaKafar Beribi Omer, v'chiper alav me'asher chata ala nefesh, v'chi be'ezo nefesh chata zeh. What are we talking about here? Where a person did a chet? Ella, we're talking about someone should tzir atzmo min hayayin, someone who pains himself from the word tsar by not having wine. If a person restricts himself as it relates to food only from wine, he can drink tequila, he can drink other drinks, he just can't have anything from a grape. That person's considered a chote as well. Huge divergence in Christian theology and Jewish theology. They shun the pleasure. We embrace the pleasure. You have to be a mensch about it, but we embrace it. There's no such thing. If you don't drink the wine, you're chote. You got to find the balance. You got to strike that balance. That's not true of other cultures where they're much more absolute in black and white. As one of my rabbeim said many times over, and it is seared into my memory, to have a complex hashkafa is the right way to go. You have to know how to navigate complicated scenarios, and you're going to fail sometimes for sure. But that is the threading of the needle of hashkafa, is to not be absolutist, is to know how to live in a world that is a little bit complex and a little bit. You can drink. what's considered too much? You have to know yourself. Is it one shot? Is it 2 shots? Or is it 0 shots? But you have to know the answer to that question. Here, the Gemara says you're a chote. If you don't have that balance, you're a chote. Even if you're l'chumra, that's not frum. What's frum is to have the right balance. That's an implication from the Gemara. Mikan, says the Gemara, kol hayoshev b'tainis nikra chote. Anyone who sits in a tainis, they are considered a chote. V'hadin, says the Gemara, wait 1 second, how can you say that? V'hadin kra b'nazir tamei ksiv. Your understanding of Rebbe Lazar HaKafar was talking about a case of a nazir tamei. So maybe, says the Gemara, maybe that's why he's considered a chote. Says the Gemara, no, that's just a reference in the pasuk mishum deshana b'chetu, just because this person did repetitive crimes. That's what the pasuk's referring to. But still, the possibility of our understanding that a Nazir Tahor is still considered a chote, that is still true. And the Gemara seems to conclude that way, that for a Nazir to accept, for a person to accept upon themselves Nazirus is going to be considered a chet, which is a bit of a strong point. So we'll start with the next. What? Yeah, mutter. It's not a chote. It's a machlokes in the Gemara. We see it here. It's a machlokes here on Yud Amud Aleph, and we saw that. You're right. There's another sheet as well. So it's not clear, but it is the din. Oh, you're saying Shimon HaTzadik doesn't align? The story of Shimon HaTzadik actually doesn't really reference whether or not he considers it okay for the person to become a Nazir. All he was saying in his story, Shimon HaTzadik, is that he never ate from an asham of a Nazir tamei. That's all he said. So it must be that he's let you tell. So it's not mashma in the Gemara that way, but it must be that way. Wishing you all a beautiful night.